Why this? To give a little bit of pretext, I went to go do a little bit of problem solving for a church and their audio issues. The issue was they got a new laptop and they were trying to connect back to the mixer that they had so that they could both send and receive audio to Zoom, which sounds simple enough, but it wasn't. So the issue that I've kind of settled on, that was the problem, was to do with the drivers. Now, it took a very, very, very long time to arrive at that conclusion. Well, not too long, but long enough for my standards. And the issue is that somewhere within the Microsoft provided audio drivers with regards to USB connectivity, there is a defect. Now, to keep it as brief as possible, how I was able to diagnose the issue to be the drivers. I was running audio out from the mixer. Now it's being taken care of by the laptop. It's drivers, it's audio drivers. It's pumping in signal, and I was taking it right out from the source. At first, I thought, okay, maybe it was Zoom. Believe me, I went through every single Zoom setting. Tried it in Teams. I went through every single Teams setting. I went through anything that could process audio. And is this the issue, right? No, it's not. It's not the software of Zoom or anything. Later on down the chain of processing, I went through and I wiped. There was things installed that came pre-installed, like some sort of Dolby Atmos thing, which of course does audio processing, but I think it was more for if you have a surround sound, hooking the laptop into a 5.1 feeder system, and then you could do the audio processing in there. There was random things like that I just went and I just get rid of it in case, in the off chance that post driver there was some sort of audio effects processing that was causing a bit of an issue. As I was experimenting with our mixer and with their mixer and with various laptops running various operating systems and hearing other examples of people who were running into similar issues, depending on what iteration of the audio driver you had, it may or may not be there. So I heard of other people with Windows 10 laptops and theirs was working. The one that the church had was running Windows 10. That was fine, but then I heard of another example with the same mixer, or it might have been the ZFX 10 or whatever it is, where it didn't work with Windows 10. And in other instances where our laptops, which are Windows 11, they were operating fine with their board and with our board. We have the same board as theirs, so that's how I was doing a lot of the testing as well. But then with their new laptop, which was Windows 11, it wasn't working. So it really just depended on which version of the audio driver you were running. And in the case with their new laptop, because they literally just got it, the audio driver that they had was just, it was the default one that came when they opened it and the one that Windows shipped out, so yay. And of course, as I found out by talking to a friend in the industry, he did a lot of work with Windows. My first question was, well, can you date the drivers back to an older iteration that clearly works with Windows 11, and of course you can't do that. That seemed to be a bit of a problem. Now the issue itself, what was the issue, right? Effectively, it could handle vocals. So you would talk into a microphone, whatever. It would go in fine. Oh wow, there's a microphone in Zoom. The second it was anything with sustain, and the issue was, they have an organ, they have piano even, it suppresses the audio and it just kind of cuts out, and it's kind of like fighting to fade back in, but it's just tapering away. So anything with sustain, and even this is the best part, okay? So even if you were talking into the microphone, you were just saying words such as I am doing right now. Not a lot of sustain to it. I'm not singing or anything. But the second I would go, then suddenly it tries to start to fight it and suppress the audio. I don't know if it's just a bug in the audio driver or it's some sort of hidden noise or anti-feedback suppression system. I'm less inclined to think that, because unless there's that built into the driver and there's no way to actually open a settings for the driver to see what's going on, because there isn't, right? You can't turn that thing off like you could in Zoom because they have feedback assistant stuff. So it would just be really strange to me to have something buried within the processing that you can't access that prevents anything that has more than half a second of sustain, and suddenly it buries it. I think it was just more of a bug in varying iterations of the driver. That's my best diagnosis, right? And the reason I'm making this is because I'm sure many people are running into issues, and of course having compatible USB capability to a mixer to your laptop is imperative. You need a solution to this. It's not okay, I'll just wait for Windows to come up with a solution when they want to get their act together. I saw many articles saying, oh no, Microsoft 10 and 11 issues within the audio driver and USB connectivity, and then nothing, right? They were like, oh, Windows has addressed it. Okay, well, how long do you want the world to wait? My solution was steer clear of the Microsoft audio drivers entirely. So how do you do that? Well, it's simple. There are little pieces of hardware called audio interfaces. This is my Focusrite 2i2 2nd gen. This is not the one that we used. We had a 3rd gen one that we usually use. If you're using an audio interface, like Focusrite, the 2i2, Focusrite will have their own proprietary drivers. It's not the Windows audio codec that you see if you try to hook up a mixer via USB, right? USB-B to in this case, USB-A. When you're connecting the USB directly between mixer and laptop, you'll see that USB audio codec. That's a Windows provided driver, and it's telling the hardware how to communicate with the hardware of the laptop / the software. There's an issue in there. So by using an audio interface, you're steering clear of that problem. Now, how do you connect this? So I have the mixer here. I'm gonna point you at it. We're going to have an audio interface, the nice 2i2. I don't know, it's not in focus. Okay, that's cool, camera. But we're going USB into our audio interface. Now our USB-A is going to go to our laptop. So how do we get this to this, and what exactly are we connecting of this to this, right? For the sake of convenience, because they already grew accustomed to using the playback fader, this guy here, as their input from the laptop, or more specifically from Zoom. The convenient thing is right next to your USB out. Right here you have playback in left, playback in right, in 1/4 inch. What that means is that if I go to playback in with in this case, it's a TRS cable. Really, you're supposed to use a TS cable, but I couldn't find, this is the first cables I grabbed. If I go playback in, and I go to my output of my Focusrite, wow, this is really not in focus, that's fine. If I go to my output of my Focusrite, what'll happen, audio sends from the laptop to the Focusrite. The Focusrite, once my main knob is up, is going to send out its output, and that'll go to the playback input, this guy right here. What that means is when I start receiving something from Zoom, I can now use my fader and control the input from Zoom. So that was the way to get the audio back into it. Now the difference, and this is kind of the unfortunate thing, they kind of have to relearn. I didn't go out from the main mix. There's a reason here. So it's no longer a matrix out. Instead, it is an auxiliary out, because they're not using any monitors, or they have no reason for the auxiliary. So our mono out, and then I just went into the input. So basically, output of Focusrite to input of playback, output of board into input of Focusrite. And that's like the wiring I did. I think I did a left and a right, the playback, but I mean, it's not like they're relying on stereo stuff. So that was the wiring of it. And I'm gonna switch the camera back now. Okay, we are back in 16mm. Hello. So that was the wiring of it. Now, the reason I did what I did, and I have it now running on auxiliary, is because I don't want some sort of internal feedback to occur. How that can happen is, actually let me pick the mixer back up. If you notice here, you have, how close do I have to get to this? It's this knob right here, playback to auxiliary. So if this is up, I mean, we don't want this up, but this knob right above the playback itself. Playback to auxiliary, remember that. The issue, in this case, the auxiliary is the thing that is sending the audio, not to a speaker within the room, but back to the laptop. The playback is taking the laptop audio, putting it back into the mixer. So the second you turn that playback to auxiliary up, what's gonna happen is, well, oh, we're sending out of auxiliary, like what's coming through the playback, out through the auxiliary. Oh wait, but the thing that's coming out of the auxiliary is going back into the playback, because it's both sending and receiving the audio over and over again. You're getting some sort of internal feedback loop. So then it starts, if you do it ever so slightly, I was testing it, because I'm like, this is the knob to not turn up, right? With this configuration. You start to turn it up, and then you talk through one of the Zoom laptops, and like the echo starts compounding, and you're like, nope, just down, goodbye, good night. So you don't want to touch that one. The advantage, though, with this system, and why I did it this way, is because ideally, it's not, I don't want to say that there's a way you shouldn't. Ideally, the way that, I would do it. If I have two different mediums of sending audio to people, right? Some people online in Zoom, some people in the room, right? Ideally, I would have two separate ways to mix those respective mediums, independent of one another. So the room in this case is your main left-right, and we're no longer going to use a matrix. We're going to use an auxiliary. That way I can independently So with this, the faders, ooh, yay, that's our main left-right one, right? Well, you have this master auxiliary knob, and then all these light gray ones are all, sends to the auxiliary. So this would basically be like your sends, so you got microphones and stuff. This would all be sends to your Zoom mix. That's, to me, in my head, I'm like, I want two respective mixes, right? And the issue when they were trying to get me to do like level balancing, because they wanted me to go through and kind of remix a few things. The issue is, if the matrix is following the master, that matrix is sending to Zoom, and people are saying the piano is too quiet in Zoom, and I go to push the fader up, that impacts the sound in the room, right? I'm making the piano louder overall. The best way, in my head, to do it was, well, just have your two mixes. One for the stream, auxiliary, your main left, right, your master, do that for the room. Keep it separate. That way you can make mixing adjustments. You're already having a hard time mixing with trying to make compromises in one setting, right? Within one mix. Don't add the added complexity of trying to now compromise between two mixes in two completely separate mediums which have no relationship to one another. Hearing something in headphones or over a MacBook speaker is completely different than hearing like actual speakers in a room. That was kind of the thing I had to work through recently, and I'm hoping that it was somewhat informative, because again, I'm sure people are going to continue to run into the issue at the rate that Windows is going, or are running into the issue looking for a solution. Hopefully this can provide you with a solution. My solution when it comes to Microsoft having driver issues is, if you get an audio interface, you're not relying on Microsoft drivers for the communication of sending and receiving audio. Because if Focusrite, if their audio drivers don't work, they're in big trouble, because this should be their specialty. So if they aren't doing this right, God forbid, if their only products aren't working because they're having driver failures, that's the company right there. Microsoft can kind of get away with taking a hit and, oh yeah, we'll resolve this shortly, right? They can get away with doing that. They can just put out the warning and say, okay, if you've got USB and you're relying on USB compatibility, just don't update. We'll resolve it. Just skip to the next update. We'll have it out at some point. They don't have a lot at stake when it comes to just solely audio. Focusrite, they have a lot at stake, and it doesn't have to be Focusrite. Any audio interface, any company that produces audio interfaces is going to have the same attitude. This is our specialty. We do it well. If we're not, we're going out of business. So that was my solution. Just work with companies and implement hardware from companies for systems that have a specialty in audio, in this case. Yeah, hopefully that was informative and may have provided you with a bit of a solution. Anyways, goodbye. That's that. I said what I needed to say, so peace out.